Developers, another video about strings and one of the little functions and features and behaviors that we do with strings. So I'm going to open up file 15, strings concat. And now strings concat is short for concatenation. So concatenation, let me set up my environment. Concatenation is the process of combining strings, right? You're going to see them. There's a couple, so really frustrating, like everything else in software development. There's more than one way to concatenate strings. So I have this set up. You can take the time to code this out on your editor. But I have a couple of strings set up. Hello, world, a third one called message, and a fourth one called message alt for alternate. So we've talked a lot about defining strings in this course already. I would declare the variable name, assign it a value. Now we're going to use this function called concat, right? And concat, so you can see me type this out. If I wanted to take, let me declare another variable, var, my name, and this is my Starbucks name. So if I wanted to concat something to that, var full name, I would say that my name, I'm going to take my name and I'm going to concatenate, right? So using IntelliSense, it comes up. Now, this is what I wanted to show you. As soon as you get to the end of this and you open close parens, you get a little IntelliSense tip about how to use this. And notice that the screen is saying concat takes in ... strings, and then it says string square bracket. That is intended to say that I can put in not just one string, right? Not just one string. I can put in, well, let me do this. I can put in multiple strings, but first let me just take a peek at what my full name is going to look like. And full name is going to pop up here in 1 second. Let me open up my developer tools because I'm going to need them in a minute. So full name is now Gregorio. Now, again, it can take multiple strings. So I can say Rojas, right? So I'm going to take Rojas, and I'm going to concatenate that too. And this is going to show me now Gregorio Rojas. Now, notice that's unfortunate. That doesn't look good because there's no space between my first name and my last name. You're going to be inclined to simply say, hey, let me put a space there, right? Because if you put a space there, we're going to end up seeing naturally that the space is going to show up, and that is going to be my variable name. But this is not necessarily the best thing that you want to do, because if you did have a variable, if you did have a value that held my last name, you wouldn't want to artificially start throwing in other characters into my last name, because that effectively is going to change my last name. A better way to do it is to simply say, hey, let me make another string there. And that string, which is an empty space, is going to show up on my right-hand side. So, and again, this tip that I just gave you about not manipulating the last name, that is going to be applicable in at least 60 to 70% of the use cases that you're going to try to work with. Usually, a lot of the good rules that you follow in the back end about not manipulating and changing the last name to be something other than what the last name is, that's very much, it's probably 99% of the time valid in the back end. Here in the front end, you know, again, there's going to be use cases where this would be okay. I am naturally inclined not to want to do that because I know that makes me feel icky. It's not a good thing to do. I'd rather start doing things like this. Now, here, I've done this example with concat, and I've done concat now below using variables, right? So I can use a variable. I can use string literals I can have in here. I can do anything that I like, all right, as long as they're strings, as long as they're string values. In fact, if I were to put in a number, right, if I were to just put in a number in here, let's see what happens there. Let's see how message ends up rendering. And you see that message ends up rendering with the number there. That ends up rendering with the number because generating the string representation of a number is straightforward. It looks just like the number does, right? So now if you end up putting an array there, if you end up putting an object there, you're going to get some something that you might not expect. So let me just go with an array so that you can see what an array is going to look like when you start trying to concatenate that as well. And so we see here that it showed up as nothing. And now if I put in an empty object, let's see what happens with the empty object. Object, object. So you should get used to seeing this. Object, object. When you see object, object, where does the word object, object come from in square brackets? That's simply the JavaScript engine's best attempt at representing this object as a string. In the future, you'll learn on how to change that depending on the objects that you're working in. But without there being an obvious way for the JavaScript engine to take this object and make it into a string, it'll represent it as object, object. And that happens a lot. Okay, let's go back over here. Let me take this out. And I want to clean up this space a little bit. Again, look, there's different ways to concatenate the string. We've done the plus before. Whether you do it with a plus, an empty, plus another variable, you get hello world, you get hello world. Naturally, the prefix here that I have at the top, concatenating with the suffix, is a little bit more verbose. Let me clean that up so we have apples to apples comparison. Hello world, hello world. It's the same value here, but we achieved it two different ways. Let me get rid of this name. And now let me show you something that might be a little confusing. What I'm going to do, let me get rid of these. I'm going to get rid of this. And what I'm going to say is, I'm actually just going to start off with message, right? So message is hello, and then the suffix is world. What feels better here, right? What might make you feel not good, what might make you feel a little weird, is when we talk about message is equal to message plus suffix, right? So forget for a second that that's going to come up there without a space. Message is equal to message plus suffix. Sometimes as you're being introduced to software development, you're going to see us use this variable on the left hand and on the right hand side of the equals. And your mind is still not like, still feels like, hey, but message has a particular value in it. It's the same value here. Like, what's going on here? Why it's going on here? Sometimes your mind might get a little stuck as to how is this value changing? How is it that we're doing and we're reusing the variable named message and the value that message has? How are we reusing that, right? So that gets a little, sometimes it's you just, stutter a little bit on it. So let me set this up again so I can draw on the screen for you a little bit more of what's going on, because this is a really good example to talk about again, variables, and variables are pointers. So I'm going to use this little utility function that I have to take a little snapshot of the fact that I have a message and I have a suffix. All right, and so I'm just going to hit save here to make sure my little snapshot gets taken care of here. And we'll see at the top we have message and suffix, and then message again got rendered. Well, message hello, and the suffix as world. Ooh, I have to say render objects. That's why. Okay. Now this is gonna look better, right? Debugging live in action. So message and world, and now message is hello world. Suffix remains. So this is two pictures of what these variables look like, a before and after, if you will. Okay, let me point this out here. Let me pull this out so I can draw on it and I can show you before we continue. When I execute this function, what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking a picture of these variables. Message is hello, suffix is world. And then the code continues. So as the code continues, boom, 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 what happens next? Here's what happened next. Message ends up being hello world, and suffix remains unchanged because no one assigned any other value to suffix before, right? So that's what's happening. So this is a before and after situation. Here's the before, and then this is after. Now, let me draw this a little bit more clearly as to what's going on. That's the before, that's the after. And I'm just going to go full screen with this and come back to drawing. So, the variable message, when this first started out, remember, the variables, they themselves, we're going to talk about the variables holding a value. But that's sometimes when we say it holds a value, that the variable has a value, you think about that value being in here. Like somehow inside of, and I've seen a lot of documentation talking about the variable being a box, that there's something inside of, right? So you associate that variable with it being a thing. The variable is not a thing. The variable, better said, is a pointer to a thing. So here, this message is pointing to the word hello. Okay, so the word hello lives out in memory somewhere, right? It's just sitting out there somewhere in memory, and message is pointing to it. So then comes this other operation. Let me open up my VS Code, and let's switch back to this for a second here. Then this line is going to execute. Right, so this line executes, and we say message plus suffix, right? We're going to evaluate this expression, and we're going to assign that value to message itself. So what's going on there? Well, with respect to the pointers, what's going on there is that the computer is going to take the value that it finds here, right? Because it looks at the pointer, and then it takes the value that it finds here, and it creates actually a third string, right? That actually contains, the third string is actually the string that contains hello world. And here's that string, right? So it can actually create that third string here. Let me erase this right here. So when I talk about, so here's A plus B equals C. So here's that third string. It creates that third string and takes this variable message, which is pictured here, remember before and after, and points it to this new string. Right, so it uses the pointers and say, I'm going to grab hello. These are the ingredients to the expression. I'm going to grab hello. I'm going to grab world. I'm going to combine them. And I'm going to take this pointer and point it at that. The original strings are actually still in memory. Okay, the original strings are still in memory somewhere. They get the computer, the JavaScript engine, the environment is going to take care of cleaning that, what we call garbage up a little bit later. But we have string A, it lives in memory. Here's string A. String B, it lives in memory. When we do A plus B, which is the operation that we have here on line 29, message plus suffix, when we have message plus suffix, what we do is that we actually create a third string in memory, and this is the third string here. When that operation has completed, what we then do is take the pointer message and point it to the variable. We take the variable is actually a pointer, and we take that pointer and we point it to that new string. Okay, so that's this is really important, especially because we're going to start talking about objects soon, to start wrapping your mind around, again, the variables are pointers to values. Right? There's the memory, the specific value in memory. There's a couple of different places where these values can be stored. That's a little non-foundational JavaScript. We'll talk about that in an advanced class. But the variables are pointers to values in memory. Okay? Think about that. Keep that in the back of your head. Come back to this video because this video will be a basic foundational discussion on that topic when you get to more complex situations. Okay, and now, believe it or not, we still got one more lesson to talk about strings coming up here with string interpolations.